Hi again, everyone. I'm Ollie Matthews. This is the Narcissistic Resistance, and this resistance video is sponsored by contribution from Anonymous, and here is her story. Dear Ollie, thank you for all you do. Hearing from other viewers helps me validate my own experiences and encourage me to write too. So here goes. It's a bit long. It's a bit of a long story, so feel free to edit to just cover the main parts. I just found it easier to tell all, but appreciate that this would likely make too long a video. I'd like this video to be from Anonymous. Before I was born, I heard all this from my mom as she would repeatedly bringing up an argument she had with my dad in front of me and my brother when we were children. My mom met my dad at a dance at nursing school. A lot of abusive nurses, you notice that? My dad's sister was training to be a nurse, and my mom was training to be one as well. I've always wondered if narcs deliberately go into so-called caring profession as a cover for who they really are. Yep, because it gives them cover, they can take advantage, it's perfect for them. So you can hear, you know how much work and caring I got to do at work, and fuck off. Anyway, my mom would nearly always bring up their arguments, how they got engaged. My mom and dad were out somewhere when they had an argument. I had no idea what about, and she never explained. And my dad apparently grabbed my mom's arm really hard. Subsequently, they got married. What? My grandma, my mom's mom, would say to me when I asked her about my parents' early days, I did ask your mother after she went to meet your dad's family, were they nice? And your mother said, no, not really. I've never understood how these various incidents my mom and dad still went ahead. I never understood how after these various incidents my mom and dad still went ahead and married. My parents' respective families never got on with each other from the start. It was almost like they were in a perpetual war against each other. Each family lined up against the other, with my parents each backing their own family, then having each other's backs. I often never really knew how I fit in with all this, given my parents' continued loyalty to their own clans above all else. It really came across as if they didn't see me as a part of either of their families in the same way they didn't see themselves as part of each other's. I don't think they ever realized any of this, or if they did, they didn't particularly care. My mom would also frequently loudly say to my dad in an argument, again in earshot of my brother, who is 8 years younger than me, and I believe this was deliberate so we would be sure to hear, how she was returning from a visit to her parents not long after my mom and dad had gotten married. She had turned to her stepdad, who was driving her back. She didn't learn to drive until around the time my brother came along, and said in tears that she didn't want to go back to my dad. According to an aunt, one of my mom's sisters, the fact that my mom stayed in the marriage was my grandma's fault. She was referring to my mom's mom, as my grandma had apparently told my mom when she first complained to her about my dad, you have to stick with it. I should say that my grandmother, the mother of mom, had mom when she was 15. No one ever really spoke about mom's father. The only thing my mom ever told me about him was his name. My dad also told me that my mom had a sister by the same dad, and that sister was just like my mom, and that my mom was in contact with her. I never met the supposed sister, and if she existed, I now doubt the truth of anything my dad says. My mom's never said anything about me to her. My mom loves to keep secrets and will always say to me, I told you that before. Yes, I did. To my, I didn't know that. You sure about your dad's the one lying, not your mom? Because it sounds like your mom might be the liar in all this. My grandma's mother died when my grandma was about 15, I think. Her father had died a few years earlier, so both she and her sisters, two older, two younger, but still minors, were without parents from a young age. My grandma had had a hard life losing parents, an infant son, a politician brother who was suspected to have been murdered, general treatment as a second-class citizen in a country that was not of her birth, then a load of relatives who died in quick succession, her own long and drawn-out death at the end of that line, including a great-granddaughter who was not yet one, but she was always very loving toward me. She had a bit of a food addiction and later associated health problems, diabetes, heart disease. My grandma once told me that she asked my granddad, i.e. my mom's stepfather, to marry her. She was a very forthright woman. I think that she also told me at the same time that it was her sister who was first courted by my granddad, but my grandma who decided that she wanted him. Curiously, my mom always called my granddad uncle, which I guess is something that my grandma told her to do. She has always been granddad. This is very confusing to I recently noticed a big gulf between my mom and her siblings, who are effectively half siblings. This has arisen in the aftermath of my grandma's death. My mom was the oldest, and after her came two more children who stayed with my mom in the Caribbean after my grandma went to join my granddad after he emigrated to England to look for work. My mom is pretty close to her sister, who she was in the Caribbean with. Her brother, who they were also with, isn't really close to anyone. It is very hard to keep track of everything here. Since my grandma died, I noticed a big gulf open between my mom and the sister she's close to and the other sisters who are all younger and were born in England. My sense is that when my mom was left behind in the Caribbean for a few years, she spent her formative years being brought up by a woman, a school teacher, whom my mom always speaks warmly about, but who sounded like a total bitch. I don't really know too much about this woman, though, who is long dead. My mom is nearly 70, but this is the sense I got. My dad would often provoke my mom by reminding her that she was just a half-sister to her siblings, and I know that hurt her. He would often make disparaging remarks about my mom's family, suggesting that they were beneath his own family in social terms. This is what I meant about both parents being for their own families than for each other. It was just plain weird and confusing for me as I was a product of both families. It sounds like the most confusion is coming from your mother's side of the family. Your mother's throwing out all these problems, these sisters, these uncles, and your father's taking all the blame for it. How does that work out? You are it is nearly impossible to keep track of all the people you're trying to explain in your mother's life, in and out, relationship, not related, but somehow it's your father's the problem. It sounds like your mother and your mother's side of the family is because you haven't told me anything about your father here. But you're telling me all these red flags about your mother's side of the family. But it seems like your father's taking all the blame for it. At Christmas time, it was always the same thing. My mom would want to spend it out of town with her own family. My dad would always insist that it be spent at our home. Yeah, you know what? Your mom's the asshole here. Your mother is one of these women, okay, one of these people, not even a woman thing. It's usually women, but men do it too, who are married to their own family. No matter what, their family comes before all else. Your dad wants to have Christmas in his own home with his own family. Your mother puts her family above you, probably your brother, and your father. Yet, your father is getting blamed for being the asshole here. What you're telling me about your mother, and I tell this to people, to guys, usually guys, is a giant red flag to run away. When you have a woman who is so obsessed with being with her own family all the time at holidays and run. It is a red flag. It is a glaring red flag. Your father was absolutely right. Christmas should have been spent at your home. Not every Christmas with her family, who half of them she's not even close to. Where there's stories running around here and there, and somehow all the lies are your father's. My mother would then spend the time around New Year with her family, and my brother and I would also go along. Initially, my dad would join us, but as the years went by and the divisions between him and my mom's family got worse, he no longer bothered. When my mom returned, my dad would, without fail, accuse her of seeing someone else, and she would argue back that she was just visiting her family. Every year, it was the same scene repeated, and repeated again near enough whenever my mom went to visit her family, often alone, as my dad never wanted to join her. Doesn't sound like he was very welcome. It sounds like when your mother's at her side of the family, it's all about them. And I would venture to guess, okay, since the families didn't get along to begin with, that your mother's side of the family was pretty brutal to your father. Pretty brutal. I know how Caribbean women are. I know how I know how UK, they are in the UK and in England. Everything you're telling me points to your mother, not to your father. And maybe he did question whether she was screwing around on him every Christmas. Might have been hard, because it might have been hard for him to understand, why is this woman so infantilized? So, excuse me. It's a confusing thing when you see a grown-ass woman who puts her mommy and daddy, her brothers and sisters, and her family above everybody else. That's what your mother's doing. It's what your mother did. And to be quite honest with you, I don't blame your father for not going there anymore. Why go there and put up with what I'm sure he was putting up with? During their many arguments, my dad would often my mom would often throw in that my dad didn't want to have children. I sometimes wonder why my mom went ahead, because she was trying to alienate you from your father, and it's worked. Even though I don't know if they got divorced or not, she was alienating you from your father then. She was putting a bad image of your father then. The whole while she's the one running around acting like a fucking asshole. I can see these stories a mile away. I see this shit a mile away. And we know these Caribbean women, they don't like to be stood up to. They don't like it. I sometimes wonder why my mom then went ahead and had me, given the difficult circumstances of their marriage. Because she's making it up. That's why. She throws it in his face. What does he say? Yeah, that's true. I didn't want to have children. Or did he deny it? You're not giving me anything. You're cutting off everything from your father's side. This is how somebody who's been brainwashed for one to support one side acts. My mom would also throw in that my dad apparently wanted my mom to have an abortion. And again, all said with me and my brother within earshot. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what did he say? Did he deny it or did he admit to it? When I was born, my mother was disappointed. She told her sisters in front of me that boys are easier than girls. She had expected or wanted me to be a boy. I saw some cards predating my birth in which people all seemed to be expecting her to have a son. I remember her asking at about the age of 3 or 4 whether she loved me, and remember her hesitant reply as she said yes without any conviction. Photos of me as a young child show a sad-faced little girl. I rarely smiled. As an adult, I rarely give a wide smile. I grew up with gap teeth that are not really straight, although I had braces to correct a crooked smile. My treatment stopped short of fixing my gaps. According to my mother at the time, the orthodontist told her the gaps couldn't be fixed. What a crock of shit. Your mother is a fucking pathological liar. She lies about everything. She lies about what people told her, about what people said, and she's very, very manipulative in how she does it. This is how these Caribbean mothers act towards their daughters. Or, to really simplify it down, okay, for you, another black mother abusing her black daughter and turning her against her father. If you really want to boil it down to brass tacks, that's what's going on here. Your mother lies habitually. Habitually. The orthodontist couldn't fix the gap. What a ridiculous... Only the fucking narcissistic sociopath. Okay? But this is the shit I had to hear. These are the type of lies my mother would tell. And her mother would tell. These fucking whoppers. Oh, that's what the doctor said. What doctor would say... What orthodontist would say, would put braces on your teeth to fix a crooked smile and then say we can't fix the gaps in your teeth? That's the easiest thing to fucking fix. And you're blaming your father, right? Fast forward several years and all the orthodontists I have spoken to have told me the gaps are what braces are for. Of course they are. Of course they are. When I mentioned this to my mom, she got very defensive. Of course she did. Because she's a fucking pathological liar. She destroy your teeth. You think she's not going to destroy your relationship with your father? Also on the toes on one foot grew crooked too. Also the toes on one foot grew crooked too, particularly on one foot, and neither of my parents ever thought to do anything about this. I still have problems with my feet and remember my mom mocking a fungal infection of one. What a mother. Again. The black mother destroying her own daughter. Hated you. And you wanted her love. You would believe anything that came out of her mouth, wouldn't you? Wouldn't you? I still have problems with my feet and remember my mom mocking a fungal infection of one of my toes when I was trying to relax in the garden at home. One of the few places in which I would not cram my feet into shoes that didn't show my toes. At least my dad paid for me to have veneers when I was 18, although my smile is less than perfect. This was an improvement. Your dad or your mother's telling you wanted you aborted, had your teeth fixed. This is making me incensed again. Despite the defects in my appearance, she would try to show me up in front of other people, mostly her sisters. She would try ordering me about when I was older. Once she asked me to do something for her in front of my dad. Her starting words were always, "Can you do me a favor?" Said in a sing-song voice. My dad told me not to do what she said. She would So your dad told you not to do it because your dad knew what she was. Your dad, who supposedly didn't want you and wanted you aborted, is the one telling you the right thing to do when dealing with your mother. Don't listen to her. Don't listen to her. You don't need to be divorced. Your parents don't need to be divorced to be alienated. She would hark back to my childhood before her sisters, telling them how in my prom, I was so hoity and never smiled. She would bring up the same thing again and again, yet I cannot recall one occasion on which my aunts would tell tales about their own children. As I got older, my mom would start telling me stuff like, "You're not taller than me," constantly comparing our heights and even the length of our slimness of our fingers. She would bemoan her thickening waist. She never taught me things like how to cook or how to use a sewing machine, even though she thought she could do these things well. Instead, I was a nuisance, always fit for menial tasks, such as peeling vegetables. Anyway, I picked up some skills nonetheless. My memory as a young child is of my father telling me negative things about my mom behind her back. Sometimes my mom would come into the room where he was telling me this stuff, and she would not say anything, but silently get whatever she had come for before turning around and leaving. Sounds to me like your father was telling you the truth about your mother. See, your mother's game is to act like it was all innocent, like you weren't meant to hear something, but you're in earshot, so you could. She didn't know how to deal with it, your father just laying it out for you. Because then she wasn't going to be able to control the situation. She wasn't going to be able to control the lie. She wasn't even going to be able to frame the situation to look the way she wanted it to look. This harmed relations with my mom until up to about the age of 10, when I began to see through what my dad was doing and started to side with my mom more. Or it was easier to be brainwashed by your mom. Sounds to me like your dad was trying to warn you about what your mom was doing, and your mom was telling lies about your father. Because your father's the one who fixed your teeth. Your father's the one who told you not to listen to your mom when she was trying to embarrass you in front of your aunts. But now you think your father was the one trying to screw you over behind the scenes and not your mother? Got it backwards. You got it backwards. What I found, though, was even though I tried to get close to her, she would keep me at arm's length. She rarely showed me any affection. Having said that, neither did my dad give hugs or kisses, although he would act more warmly towards me than her and also had a sense of humor. My mom was the punisher. She loved threatening me or her brother with the ruler or her slipper for the most trivial things that she enjoyed using both of these. I recall her laughing as my little brother cowered while she held the ruler aloft on the verge of striking him. I loved to dance, and my parents paid me to take ballet lessons from the age of 4. I could never understand why Mom insisted I eat a full lunch before my Saturday afternoon ballet class. She wasn't the type to take part in exercise, and maybe she didn't know that a full lunch followed by an hour of jumping around don't mix. Or maybe she enjoyed seeing me with a food in my belly in my leotard. It was ridiculous. Years later, after weeks of rehearsal for a choral concert, I invited both my parents along. My mom made out that she would be too tired as it was a weeknight. My dad loved singing and had signaled that he was keen to attend. I suppose you could ask why he didn't go without her. I often wondered, and my dad thought the same also, that my mom was probably jealous that I had a dad and she never really knew hers. When my dad and I were close when I was young, we often went to the cinema, to the parks, and for drives together. My dad said something weird once about how other men were looking at him as if I, his daughter, were his girlfriend. That's weird. Ugh. This is where this is going again. Wouldn't be a story from the Caribbean without sexual abuse, I guess. This made me uncomfortable, and I no longer wanted to hang out with my dad, and I also wondered why my mom and dad were not hanging out together instead. My mom didn't seem too bothered about the whole thing. Neither of them ever went on date nights. Instead, life was just about occasionally visiting my dad's relatives who lived nearby, or having them come over, or occasionally visiting my mom's relatives who were increasingly less willing to return the favor. Dad didn't have any friends, although I think this can be common among married men of their generation. And although my mom had friends, they never came round, nor did neighbors. My parents sent me to an all-girls school. It wasn't fancy, and it was run by the state. I didn't start dating until I was 18, pretty late. This was in the days before cell phones, and if I was out with friends at a bar or club and had a guy ask my number, my dad would answer the house phone by telling the guy, "No one of this name lives here." After years of seeming rejection, I caught my dad doing this. It had really knocked my confidence that no guy ever seemed to get in touch despite seeming interested initially. When I confronted my dad, he denied it all. I had caught him in front of my mom and brother answering the phone in this way when we were having Sunday lunch around the table at home. My mom said nothing. I do wonder if she knew what he was basically doing all along. Despite her background as a nurse, midwife, and then health visitor, basically a sort of community nurse who visits newborns, organizes their vacations, etc., you would not have thought it from the time we were watching an episode of a TV series about the human body. I was in my early 20s, and I remember my mom saying about a lady shown in the program who had the same first name as me and was pregnant. X is pregnant. Yuck, look at her fetus. This really shocked me that she had such a negative and childish attitude and seemed to be making remarks that were really directed at me. I absolutely took it personally, as it seemed to be strongly hinting that he had no right to become a mother. I had no right to become a mother, and in fact it would be disgusting if I did this. Yet she would continually ask me about my old school friends, saying, "I bet she's married now," about some girl whom she never met. She never had the same expectations of me. In fact, when I was helping me buy stuff like bedding and kitchenware in my late 20s when I bought my current place, she kept on picking out stuff meant for one person, as if I was meant to stay single my whole life. A single duvet and pillow, a tiny roasting tin for roast dinners. I began to notice a pattern also. Nearly every Friday night she would call me on my home phone to chat. This is normally a night when people catch up with their friends and go on dates, etc. It was almost as if she was checking up to make sure I was home on those eves and not out having fun, living my life, or dating. I wonder why she was so obsessed with her own family. Seems like she can't let anybody go move on with their life, can she? Can she? I think your father probably took the overprotective dad thing a little too far with scaring men away. Which he shouldn't have done. But I think in the back of his mind, he was probably thinking he was doing it to protect you. Neither of my parents seemed interested in whether I had many or even any friends. I didn't, as generally as I found it hard to make friends. I was shy and lacking in confidence, or whether I was dating, other than to break things up before they even got started. As I was so socially awkward, I have found it less and less easy to make lasting friendships, and as time goes by, I get more and more lonely. I am also single with only failed relationships to my name, which were never going to go anywhere, and in which I was evidently being used. My mom would always commiserate me, saying, "I don't know why people are like that, why they never ask you to join them on nights out." Now I realize she was probably enjoying me naively telling her my tales of woe and feeding off my self-pity. I nearly didn't get my first salary job. I had to sit final exams, and for the very last two, my mom was very insistent that I accompany her to her great aunt's 70th birthday out of town, where all the rest of the family would be over the weekend before I was to sit the exams, which would mean I would get little to no revision done. Those were the first exams I ever failed in my life, and they nearly cost me that job. Fortunately, the firm were happy to take me on, provided I passed my resits, which I did, but meant me revisiting over the summer while everyone else was able to enjoy that time as they already had finished. I had to go to many interviews with firms before I secured that job. Robocall. You know, the robocall is supposed to pick those up before it even rings. I do sometimes wonder whether some of the letters from firms were intercepted in some way. It was really odd. A professor later remarked on this, how he'd been writing all my references and it must have kept him so busy. Yet my mom always made out that it was my dad who was not supportive of getting that job, and I came to share her view, not seeing how intent she could be at undermining me to herself. He would call me an ungrateful for all the things he's done for me, talk disparagingly about me to relatives, making me out to be some kind of slut when I did go out for nights out with friends. He never had a good word to say about my friends, and I would end up falling out with them in time. I really can't blame him for that, but his constantly negative attitude towards others didn't help. I was dating a guy in my hometown, and when I returned from university during the holidays and was heading out to catch up with him, my dad would start berating me, telling me that I needed to stay at home and study. Later, when I began distancing myself from my dad, he would constantly pick fights with me and threaten me that he was going to tell his family, many of whom I never met as they lived abroad, about all the bad things I had done. I had no idea what these things were or what he was talking about. When I moved into my own place, I would get silent phone calls in the middle of the night. So much so that I ended up unplugging my phone as it began to have a phobia about the phone ringing. My brother told me that it was my dad, and one time I picked up the phone and didn't answer as usual, only to hear my dad's voice on the other end. So my brother was right. It's all about control. Really, since my mom's mom, died a few years ago, I feel that my mom has been trying to keep my brother and I at odds with each other. My brother and I were really close when we were younger. Even a couple of times, strangers remarked at this. Yet my mom always tried to demonize me in my brother's eyes. I have always thought most people would be very happy to have children who get on rather than squabble with each other. I noticed when I first moved into my own place, my brother began to contact me less and less. Weeks could pass before you would return my calls or texts. I feel that my mom has been whispering in his ear and trying to get him to compete with me, to get his own home, to make it bigger, better than mine, to get a new job and make sure he is earning more than me. I really don't have a proper relationship with him and cannot talk with him about anything such as our parents. Recently, my brother split up with his girlfriend, with whom he has a 3-year-old child. At the same time as the difficulties with his girlfriend arose, my mom, who has always been much more affectionate with my brother than with me, announced she was divorcing my dad. It has always been on the cards, but she'd never previously taken any decisive steps towards it. At around the same time, I began to experience apparent stalking episodes, a whole other story, and went to stay with one of my mom's sisters for a couple days to get away from it all. That sister explained that my brother and his girlfriend were having problems. My brother never told me anything about this. As I say, I rarely hear from him. That sister also seems to have told my mom everything I said after I expressed my frustrations with my mom and dad to this aunt. Following this, I got a call to say that my dad had been arrested at my mother's request for emotional abuse, which in England it now counts as domestic violence, and therefore a criminal offense. I hadn't been in touch with either of my parents or their families for a long time, as I've had enough of the toxic atmosphere that developed whenever I had contact with them. It was affecting my ability just to exist, to do my job without my mind thinking about them, look after myself, build a social life or a life for myself, really. I can never stick at anything. I couldn't deal with them anymore and also decided to cut ties with family members who might try to draw me back in. I'm not sure if exposing my mom to her sister as a narc was the trigger or for my mom's actions against my father. When I briefly spoke to my father after a long time, he told me it was because he found my brother and his girlfriend arguing and worried that my brother was verbally abusing his girlfriend. As according to my dad, she was very quiet. However, it seems rich that my dad, who has been verbally abusive towards me, my brother, and my mom, should accuse someone else of the same thing. Further, my brother subsequently told me that my dad had said something to his girlfriend about my mom, and this had nearly caused my brother and his girlfriend to split. They have now split, albeit amicably, and my brother's girlfriend has taken their child back to her country. When I also briefly spoke to my mom, she told me, "Why does the man always have to get the house? They can lock him up and throw away the key." I told the police that I think your dad has a mental health problem. Before this, on Mother's Day this year, my mom contacted me to say he had woken up that morning with one side of his face paralyzed. It was later found to be Bell's palsy and not a stroke, and she had gone with him to accident and emergency. A few weeks after his mom died, a couple of days after Father's Day, my dad appeared in court. I only know this from an internet search. If convicted, he will face up to 12 years in prison. My dad sent me flowers at Christmas and on my birthday. Although I sent him Christmas flowers, apart from when I heard he had Bell's palsy, I haven't been in touch with him. I'm no longer in touch with anyone. A couple of people who I confided in about all this told me not to get involved. When I did speak to my dad, he told me he thought my mom had set it up and she wants the house they both still live in from the divorce. Sounds familiar. Being that she fucking brought it up. I don't buy this from your father? I'm sure your father has some issues. Clearly he does. Okay, this is what happens when the narcissist goes through it. This is why I had to leave fucking New Jersey. This is why, right here. I promise you your mother's lying about this. I promise you she's lying about this. Your father may be an asshole. 12 years for emotional abuse. She wants the house. God, this is sickening. Your father, who was the only one who cared about you to get your teeth fixed and told you to stand up to your mother. All of it. Yeah, I get it. He was screening your phone calls from your boyfriends. That's bullshit. That's something dads have done in the past. If you had a decent mom who would have told him to knock it off, then you maybe would have had a chance. But no, you didn't have that. She let him sabotage you. She let it get out of hand. She was setting him up. She was setting him up since you were kids. Telling you she didn't want you. He wanted you aborted, all of it. Meanwhile, his actions said different his whole life. Now, she's got him up for 12 years trying to get his house. Fuck that. Fuck that. Who's telling you not to get involved? Her side of the family? Right. Why exactly doesn't his side of the family like her side of the family? Does he think they're a bunch of fucking gypsy grifters? I bet they do. And I bet the people who are telling you to stay out of it is because they don't want you taking his side and telling the court the shit she's done. Why? So they can all get the fucking house. That's why. They're stealing the house. Her side of the family is stealing the house from your father, and they don't care if he goes to prison. And your mother has gaslighted you so much since you were a child, you're believing most of this shit. Doesn't add up. Yeah, the comment was creepy, but did he do anything? Maybe he was trying to make you feel good about yourself in a fucked up way when he said, people think you're my daughter, my girlfriend, not my daughter. It's a little weird. But after years of being gaslighted and brainwashed by your mother, you could see things that just aren't there as well. He is claiming that she has plenty of friends up and down the country and can live anywhere and doesn't need the house. I don't think this is true. He also doesn't think he has done anything wrong in relations to the charges of emotional abuse. So I've been staying out of it, but I could say a few things about my mom and her emotional abuse and neglect of me, yet she is trying to get someone else put in prison and feels entitled to do this. Exactly. Oh my God, this is horrifying. Look, as emotional abuse is real, okay? But it's also very subjective. Who decides? Some judge decides what emotional... Look, we all know what emotional abuse is. But the problem with emotional abuse, as much as I would love to see it prosecuted, it's still subjective. It comes down to a fucking opinion. And you can't take away somebody's opinion or somebody's freedom over an opinion. Who stepped in and fixed your teeth? Your dad? You need to let him go to prison for 12 years so your mother can get a fucking house? Really? That's surprising. Admittedly, my father also played a large part in damaging my self-confidence and self-esteem, ability to develop and hold on to friendships and relationships, contributing to my present state today, although I am working on myself and taking responsibility for getting myself on form. I know my brother and mom have also been damaged by my dad. For one instance I remember is of my father shortly after my brother graduated, right after the panic of 2008, complaining that my brother, who was living at home then, wasn't applying for jobs. This was at a time when jobs were hard to come by, as employers were laying people off, but my brother was diligently sending off job applications. Well, look, man, that's not an unreasonable thing. After college, he wants to make sure he's doing the right thing. That's not a bad thing. Between my mom and dad, I don't think things are so black and white as I sometimes felt they would set off each other off. It wasn't all one-sided, and I have seen my mom start arguments with him out of nowhere. Not so long ago, my mom sent me a letter, or at least it was half a letter, as a page was missing. She was saying that for some reason, which wasn't given in the part she sent, she tried to give me to my other grandma, my dad's mom, who was my mom, who my mom always addressed as Mrs. X, to take care of when I was about 2, but my grandma told her no. When I asked her about the rest of the letter, she said she forgot to send. I didn't bother to ask what it had all been about, but I wasn't sure if it might just have been another hoovering event. Of course it was. Of course it was. This is all bullshit. Trying to get you from prevent you from defending your father. I just left it. I'm not sure I want to know. A couple days ago, I thought I would try to contact my brother, who is now single again, as explained above. When the phone was answered, I heard his voice and also my mom saying hello. I had gone over to catch up with her, and they were having dinner in a chicken restaurant. I'm a vegetarian, so not my thing. It was odd to say the least. Well, not to me. I don't recognize these people or know what to think. No contact with all of them seems the only answer. It's hard, but I no longer belong, and I think I should see this as a blessing. Many thanks in advance to taking the time to consider this letter. It's already too long and quite disjointed, and there's still stuff which I haven't mentioned because of the length. I think, though, you get the gist, or I hope so. I'd really want to know what you think of all this. Anonymous. I think you need to speak up for your father. I think your mom had you alienated long before they ever got a divorce. And has trained you to be brainwashed against your father and to see things from your father that I think aren't there. He may have his issues, okay? But your mother has gone out of her way to destroy you, to damage you, and to hold you down. Why? Because you were alienated from your father before the divorce even happened. And now she's doing what happens in so many divorces. What my family would have loved to have done is have me arrested for some bullshit charge. You need to speak up. So, I hope that helps. Thank you for your contribution and story. I appreciate it. Thank you to everybody watching. Please leave any opinions or advice in the comment section below. And again, if you want your story read on the channel, you have a topic you'd like me to cover, a narcissist you'd like to expose, you'd like to set up Skype, a phone call, have a private video made, or a Facebook live chat, or you'd like to sponsor a video like this for someone who needs help and can't afford it, or just make a contribution to the channel in general to keep it supported, growing, and successful, because this channel survives 100% on contributions from all of you. Without you, all this goes away. So if you like what you see here and you want to see more videos like this, you know what to do with the PayPal and email links in the description box. Also, please like and share this video wherever you can. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't, and be sure to click the subscription bell to be notified of all my video uploads. I'm Ollie Matthews. This has been The Narcissistic Resistance. Take care.